talk a little bit about how to do a podcast. That's something that I've been insanely passionate about lately. Not just lately, but for like the last year, I've been obsessed with it. So
Okay.
I read over your synopsis. So basically, the idea for the podcast is to have it be about dermatology, but from the perspective of the patient, for the perspective of everyday consumers and people who aren't necessarily in the field but have an interest in skincare and things like that. Is that right?
No, that they have an interest because they have a problem, mostly.
Right.
Yeah, that's why the title is on the way to the dermatologist. Generally, they have a problem. They're ready to act, or maybe they're just wanting more information.
Okay.
And there are no podcasts out there like it that I can tell. There are lots about beauty and about skincare products and maybe about Botox or fillers, but every single one of the dermatology podcasts is made for doctors trying to keep their education up. There's
Sure.
nothing for consumers.
Sure. And that makes perfect sense. That is, you definitely have found a niche that is not being exposed right now, and not being utilized. So I think that's probably pretty smart. So some fundamental questions here is how often do you plan to produce content?
Uh, well, I figure I would probably run out of podcasts that I want to do. I don't know. I guess I could do podcasts for almost forever and ever. Really, I mean, it's just basically everything that I talk about every day with people.
Sure.
But I could do it once a week or every other week. I mean, it also depends to what's the optimum amount to keep people coming to my business and keep viewing me as an authority figure, which is
Sure.
very important.
Once a week would definitely be doable and good. And depending on the platforms that you want to get on, obviously you're probably going to want to get on all of them, but it's much more attainable. So let me tell you a little bit about the background of what makes me quote unquote a podcast authority in some cases. So I had a client like yourself who asked me, not with Global Reach, but somebody else that I was working with, who said, what do you know about starting a podcast? And at the time, I had a couple friends who had done one. About one guy's an HVAC guy and he does stuff about HVAC stuff. And one of them was he was a big sports fan, Iowa Hawkeyes fan. So he did an Iowa Hawkeyes podcast. And so all I'd known was being guests on their shows. So I said, I sheepishly admitted not a whole lot. And so I decided the best way to, he goes, well, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, but I feel like it's going to be too time consuming and maybe too expensive. And I don't want to spend a whole lot on equipment. And so I designed a podcast that I called The Deep Gripping Reality, because when these type of things hit you, it's like a deep gripping reality. It holds on to you. And the idea was I was going to prove that you could create a quality podcast, Monday through Friday show. So content Monday through Friday and weekends and holidays rather. And I challenged myself. I was only going to use my cell phone, which I don't have the latest cell phone, so there's that. And so I'm limited by space and technology. I was only going to use free apps to promote it and to create the content. I would have to have some kind of a visual appeal to it as well. So every episode had to have its own unique art. And where possible, I would have guests and also do video. And also, the sixth thing was that I was going to have to be on as many social media platforms as possible and shared on as many podcast networks as possible. So it was a hefty challenge, and I wanted to. It was a proof of concept. It was to see whether or not it was even possible. So what I found is an application that you can do either you can do it on a desktop or you can do it on a mobile device, but it's called Anchor.fm, and Anchor is free.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest benefit of Anchor, in my opinion, is that once you've started your podcast, it distributes the podcast every time you publish a new one to most of the major platforms for you. The only one that you have to actually manually submit, and you only have to do it once, is for Apple Podcasts, which is where a lot of people consume them anyway. So you just have to get your RSS feed address, which is on the Anchor website once you've started it, and you go in and you submit it, and then they'll review it and they get you going. So Anchor allows you to, it has built-in tools that allow you to record segments. It allows you to add background music. It allows you to do transitions. And then you can also have your guests download the Anchor app and then send them a link when you're live and they can join in and be a guest on the show. The downside to that is that you have to be connected. You both have to be connected to solid Wi-Fi. So, it's easy to drop a guest if that's the case. So I was trying to find a good workaround for that. But I've made it to probably 80 or 90 episodes. And the first season went over 70 episodes. And then I decided Monday through Friday was exhausting. And so for a second season, it really was, because I was recording the episode on the drive to work, 45 minutes, and drive home, and editing didn't take hardly any time at all. But it was tough. So I have cut it back to now it's like once or twice a week. And my audience had grown pretty exponentially. The social platforms I was on were Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And then the content that I was creating, I was finding ways to repurpose it. So I found an app called Headliner.app that you give them the name of your podcast, and then its algorithm goes out and picks a snippet that it thinks is interesting and creates a little video, a short video, 30, 60-second video that has that snippet in it to draw people in, and then allows you to post from that platform to Instagram, to Facebook, to whatever. But you can do full episodes. So that allows you to create a YouTube page if you want to, that is audio of your podcast. So all of this
How does that app with your audio create a video?
It basically does the picture of whatever that episode's cover art is, the title, and then it does like one of those sound lines, the vibration looking sound lines.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen those.
Yeah, and you know what I found is that they're really good. Now the one thing I didn't like was that sometimes the snippet that it would pick would be the intro music. So I'd have to go into their website and actually custom make the 30-second bit, which is totally possible. But again, all of that was free. I found I have five different apps that I use on my phone to create all of this. And this season, I actually invested in a micro recorder, which has literally thousands of hours worth of stuff that I can record conversations. And so I've in season 2, I broke my rule of being all mobile, but it allows for better sound quality and more on the fly interviews and that sort of thing. But I've gotten a lot of business from it. I've had clients who started, I shared it on LinkedIn, and they reached out and said, yeah, I like the show, or they reached out for whatever reason, and then I said, hey, you want to be a guest on the show? And I made it as selfless as possible. It was all about the guest and their questions and digital marketing tips and tricks and strategies. And these people had the most engaging conversations, promoted the hell out of the show. One guy even paid to promote his episode for us. And then, and I haven't paid for any advertisement. That was just his doing because he really liked the conversation. And then 2 people have actually gone on to become clients of mine. So it has been a good lead generation tool for me. But the reason I haven't generated more clients is because that wasn't the purpose of my podcast. The purpose of my podcast was to prove that it could be done free or very inexpensively, using only mobile stuff, eliminate the excuses. Each episode takes less than 2 hours total to create and edit and get out there. So if I had been pushing for this to be a lead generation tool or had a website to support it instead of just social media, I have no doubt that it would have been astronomical success.
Yeah, I was listening to a similar podcast of yours called, I forget what it's called, some guys out of Houston. I was very close to calling them. I just had a recommendation from Tom Sweegle, which is what I came to you guys. But,
yeah,
just giving away that information because people want to know: are you an expert? Do you sound trustworthy?
Mm-hmm.
And you could basically answer all those questions on a podcast, and by basically telling people all of your secrets, which you would anyway if they were a client. It's really a great tool. Now, I'm not really sure, where podcasting fits into all the different ways people get their media. I assume it's the number one thing for driving around in the car or taking a walk.
Sure.
2 things that I do quite often.
Sure.
How else? I mean, where does it fit in the whole media landscape these days?
That's a phenomenal question. So, podcasts have been growing in popularity, especially the last 2, 3 years. People listen to podcasts when they're doing the dishes, when they're folding laundry, when they are, as you mentioned, jogging or exercising. Exercising is a huge one. One of my guests on my show that I had was his name was Trevor Ray, and he's a digital personal trainer out of Florida. And he, before he was going to be a guest, he figured he'd listen to an episode. So every morning he works out anyway, and he usually listens to podcasts. So he listened to an episode that was like 20 minutes long, and he goes, "Wow, I got a lot out of that. I'll listen to the next one." And he listened. He goes, "Well, I should probably listen to a third." And the whole purpose of him listening was just to understand the kind of show he was going on. He ended up listening to, at the time, all 45 episodes of my podcast in one sitting, because it's biteable. It's digestible. So people do listen to them on the commute. They listen to them in the doctor's office while they're waiting. They listen when they're bored and they can't watch something, or they want to passively get some background noise. It's kind of like podcasts have kind of become the new radio.
Okay.
And everybody, I mean, if you look at globally, Joe Rogan is a very, very well known podcaster who has had every celebrity on the planet. Robert Downey Jr. was on his show. There's just been just tons of people who have been on his show from all walks of life. So, there's great exposure there. But I will tell you this, Steve, the key here is that it has to play a very strategic role in your overall strategy. So, for example, one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is I have an app on my phone that I can take any video and extract the audio from it. So I'll create a video of me doing the podcast, whether it's an interview or it's just me doing the podcast itself. And then I will extract the audio from that, use that for the podcast. And then the video will either eventually it'll go on YouTube, but right now it's the snippets of it and things like that are being used for Instagram TV. So the strategy then is that the video itself will go on Instagram TV for my Instagram followers. And I create these podcasts and I schedule them out in advance. So the people who watch it on Instagram TV will get a chunk of the podcast and see it and see my ugly face. And then they tune into the podcast to get the full rest of the story. Now, that's a strategy that I took and I found a little bit of success with, but video tying in to the podcast is fantastic. There's so many videos on YouTube now that are actually podcasts, and people don't even realize it because it looks like it's just an interesting video. And then, of course, you can take the audio and you can transcribe it, and now you have a blog post. And any really great quote from there is a great social post. So you really have to, whatever you want that content for, give a lot of thought to where you're going to be applying it and how you're going to promote it.
Okay.
Plus, there's one more cool thing, is that since you're working on a new website, I will tell you this too. Most podcast platforms, whatever you go with, Anchor is no exception. You can share your podcast, but you can get it as code, as a piece of code, so you can actually embed it on your website. So you could have a page on your website specifically for your podcast episodes, and people can listen to it through the website, and people do that.
Okay. Okay. Now, I have a challenge with other podcasters don't have, or video people don't have, is that I stutter, and my fluency varies. I can have good days, and I can have really, really bad days. But if I have a general script and I know what I'm going to say, then I could usually speak very, very fluently. If it's a free-flowing conversation with someone else, could be good, could be bad.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see making a video as long as I can edit it smoothly. And I see people doing this on YouTube. They're sitting there at a desk. They're in the same position. You see these short cuts.
Yeah, jump cuts.
They speak for 10 or 15 seconds. They pause, and then they speak again for 10 or 15 seconds. That would work. Those same type of jump cuts would work for the actual audio, and also the audio for me can be made into a video if I could essentially have a stream of images of what I'm talking about. different types of acne, different acne medicines, kind of flashing across the screen for 30 seconds here and there as I talk about them, or maybe just as a sort of background information.
Sure. And you can do, so that's a really great, I'm glad you brought that up. So you can use different video editing software for that, and almost all of them will allow you to import audio. And when all I can speak for is Anchor, because I haven't tried any of the other platforms, but Anchor will allow you to, as I mentioned, you can download, or you can record in segments, but you can also upload audio to it to use, and you can download audio clips. So once you've created that segment, you can download it, and then you could put that onto a video. So you can very strategically create that video content later. It literally saves all these audio clips as a library for you to go back and reuse or enter into other episodes or whatever. So that's definitely possible. And as far as editing the actual audio clip goes, it does have a built-in editor so that you can click on the audio clip and you can cut out pieces that you don't like in the actual audio. Now, I very seldom use that because it's a lot easier to use on desktop than mobile. And as I mentioned, the majority of my podcast is done on mobile intentionally. But yeah, and also creating custom pieces of art for each episode. It doesn't have to be super fancy, but having some new imagery for each episode is also a good thing. And that's how you can use Instagram and Facebook too, is by using that. So it's definitely doable, but it depends on how much work you want to put into it, to be honest, and what your ultimate end result is, what you want out of it.
Yes, and also the when. Since I'm just starting out, there's going to be a lot of things I haven't thought of. There's going to be a lot of things I have to spend time doing with the website.
Sure.
I think that the podcast will be sort of a second step. I'll work on it over the next month or two.
Yep.
When I can, and then when we have the time and capability, then we'll start to launch it out there.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. This isn't something you want to jump into. Like in my case, I jumped into it on purpose. I wanted to see what somebody with no experience, nothing, starting from scratch with free tools could do. And what I learned, it was extremely valuable because I got so much analytics that I can use. There was so much that I got out of it. But what I learned is that if you can have a successful podcast and see decent growth and see decent response rate and sort of things like that without any kind of real promotion other than organic promotion that you do by sharing links, and having no real strategy, it's totally doable for somebody who really wants to put time and effort into it. As far as the whole issue with being concerned about how you speak, I do recommend, I wouldn't do a full-on script because it's easy to lose your place, but bullet points are a great idea. Bullet points to remind you, just an outline of what it is you want to cover, are a great way to do it. And I'm going to give you some really valuable free advice that I just recently learned. I actually shared it on an episode that aired today. But when you're creating, if you want to create killer content, you want to create stuff that people will come back to, you really have to build the curiosity. You have to encourage your listener, viewer, audience, whatever, to chase answers. And when they lose interest, when they don't have any more questions. So you start by, this is what you know, and this is what you want to know. And in between, there's this gap, and you fill that gap with as much tension as you can, building up to the reveal of what it is that they want to know. And then when you give them that information, the payoff has to be proportional to the amount of tension you've built over the time you've taken to get there. And you can keep people's attention for super, super long times, and really, really well, just by using that simple formula. Attention is tension over time times the payoff. But keeping that formula in mind when you're creating content, stop and ask yourself, am I encouraging people to continue listening because I'm piquing their curiosity as much as possible? Pique their curiosity, answer that curiosity after building up enough tension to it pique the curiosity. And it's amazing because if you watch really successful movies, you see that too. So, for example, there was an older movie in the early 2000s, I think, called Swordfish. And in that movie, the movie starts and it's like essentially a super heist bank robbery thing. And you see the main character and he's there and it's building up and the police are everywhere and they have these bombs strapped to them. And one of the people tries to escape and runs away and the bomb explodes and you just see these little ball bearings flying everywhere for blocks, and then the camera goes back to the main character. That's the intro to the movie. Grabs your attention, holds onto it. Cut to the guy sitting on a beach. Right. Sitting on a beach. So,
now,
you know,
I don't know if that I'm writing a web page now. I don't know if that is the way you want to write a web page. So let's say like I'm writing
no.
a web page on dandruff, but you want to hit them like right up front with the main message, because people are not going to want to continue reading.
True. But what I will say
hear something, yeah,
is especially, okay, so let's take that into perfect example. Thank you for bringing that up. So take that in context of a testimonial, right?
right.
A lot of companies will just ask questions about pain points and then they'll record that as a testimonial. What you should do is start out with how happy they are with the results. Then go back to where they were before the product or service, and that is how you've built tension. So you've just said, you know, this is where you want to be. You know where you are. This is where you want to be. This person was just as screwed as you are, and this is how they got to that level of awesome. So, and that's how you brand the solution. So specifically, if you want to, and if you don't have a testimonial, that's fine. You know what your audience is looking for. So give it to them at the beginning. Tell them, this is the end result. And let me tell you how you're going to get there.
Yeah. Like I just wrote my dandruff section and I edited it and I kind of I reordered things. And what I put right at the very top is big bold letters: dandruff can be well controlled fast in nearly every patient.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that encourages the question. That encourages the question, how?
Yeah. And then I have this nice little how section. This is sounding like sort of clickbaity internet writing, but I'm getting used to doing it. 5 problems that cause dandruff treatments to fail, and 5 solutions that make our dandruff treatments succeed. Problem 1, solution.
Yep.
Problem 2, solution.
Yep. So that's actually
getting used to this writing style.
Yeah, no, you know, I'll be honest with you, Steve. That's it sounds clickbaity, but it's only clickbaity if you don't give them the payoff. And the thing that you're doing that's really smart, that I don't even know if you knew you were doing, is what you're saying is brilliant for SEO. Google absolutely loves question and answer format because that's what Google is. It's an answer machine. It exists specifically to give people the best possible answers.
Oh, yeah.
So if
that's probably why GrowthMed wanted like an FAQ at the end of every disease page.
Yeah. FAQ is great for short form content. So there's 2 forms of content. There's long form content that is at least 600 or 300 to 600 words, 600 preferably, or more. The best long form content that Google loves is actually 1,000. It's like 3,000 words. It's ridiculous, but at least 600 characters.
GrowthMed insisted that my pages were 1,500.
Yeah.
Minimum of 1,500.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What I did.
Yep. The average read time is supposed to be between 6 and 8 minutes. But the short form content, which is that Q&A, is valuable for a whole nother list of reasons. Not only can it get you featured on Google, but also that content can be put into your on your Facebook. If you have a Facebook, you can actually use that in the Messenger. They have a section where you can put Q&A in there. You can also use that for Google My Business. They have a section for Q&A there. And all of this, the Google crawlers are looking for that to tie back to you as an authority figure, as a credible source of information. It's all the link juice that we've talked about in the past.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to become one of your podcast listeners, or just use your name and find you.
It's The Deep Gripping Reality. And I tell you what, how about this? I'm gonna ask you this now, and if you say no, I won't do anything. I'll delete. But I actually knew that this conversation was going to be something that would be great podcast material, and so I recorded it. And I'm wondering if you'll let me use that to promote you and your brand and your potential new podcast. Um, I'm going to use I'll have a good intro for you talking about who you are, what your expertise are, and why you're brilliant, and put it on a future show. If not, I'll just delete it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure. When the time is right, yeah, we could use it now. We could record it again, whatever you think is best.
Yeah. So I have about 25 minutes worth of material that I can turn into a decent podcast, I think. And of course, we can do another show later if you want to, but I think this would be great. So, I mean, you have quite a few kettles on the fire, so to speak. I love the idea of the podcast. I think it's great. And you can always embed that content onto your website. And I know you're working on the website, fixwarts.com. And when that comes out, I think that's going to be super successful. So in my intro, I will definitely talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. And I appreciate that. I think that if you'd said no, I would have just deleted it completely and nobody would have ever known. But I do think that the questions you have are very common questions. And the reason that I recorded it beforehand is I wanted to be able to show you how easy it is to create content.
Okay. Well, I think I should. I'm going to be doing all my recording at the desktop, so I think I should get a microphone, an external microphone.
Probably a good idea. Yeah. There's also a podcasters community that you can join on Facebook that's pretty brilliant and has all kinds of great answers to new up and comers and veterans. I think they're like 500,000 or 1 million people strong, so it's definitely worth joining that.
Okay. Well, this will be my back burner project. I'm starting to figure out I can only do a certain type of the most demanding mental work, which is the creative work. The creative writing, I can only do a couple hours a day, and then my brain just starts to fry. But actually, podcasting works a whole different set of mental muscles. So I'm just basically switching from one thing to another throughout the day, so I can get in as much work as possible. So I will keep doing the my podcast whenever I can, and soon the real bulk of the website work is going to start to take place. They should have some type of rough draft of the website by the end of the week.
Cool, perfect.
That's going to be occupying me for a little while, but this is something I really like to do. I've been listening to podcasts for years.
Nice.
Religiously, because
nice.
I was driving to Bakersfield and back like every other day. I was on the road a lot, and I'm an audio centric person. I learn by listening mostly.
Nice. Well, then I don't feel bad telling you this, but 90% of the expertise that I give daily at work end up being on my show. So if you listen to the podcast, you're going to get a lot of tips for free that I usually have to charge people for. So
good. So yeah. So I'll be listening to it. I'll be looking forward to our 1 hour monthly meetings. And if there's anything that you want me to learn more about and you want to reference your podcast, just let me know and I'll find it and listen to it. But I'm going to start listening to it. I've been listening probably about 20 to 40 minutes a day of someone else's podcast as I go out and walk around, and I get tired of sitting and tired of reading and everything. So
sure.
I'm going to switch to yours.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. It sounds like you were an early adopter, but there's a lot of people who do just that. It's when they want to have a little bit of refreshing content, and people listen to podcasts for different reasons. Sometimes it's educational, sometimes it's entertainment, but I think you've got a decent concept that is unique and definitely has a bit of a hook that could be super useful and could be a good promotional tool for you as well. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, and I will talk to you again whenever that next time is. Whenever our first. When does the first monthly meeting happen? Generally?
I'll look it up, and
within a week of it.
Yeah, it's usually it's either right before the launch of a website or right after. I will look it up and email you and let you know.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks,
right.
Thanks, Stephen,
Thank you.
And thank you very much for agreeing to let me use this for content. I think it's very valuable. So I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah, I'm excited to work with you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. So that was Steve Leon, and Steve Leon is a dermatology expert. And basically, he reached out to me because he said that he knows there's a lot of dermatology podcasts that are all for doctors to educate them, to help them toward their doctorate. But he's looking for to create a podcast that is specifically for families that are on their way to the doctor or want to know if they need to go to the doctor. The actual families, it's for them, and that's, I think, a pretty good idea, especially for what he does. So it's basically for patients. Now, Steve Leon himself spent the last 15 years working for top dermatology practices in Southern California. His passion for dermatology and patient education has led him to write 17 nationally published articles to educate dermatologists, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and basically give better outcomes for patients overall. With the podcast, he wants to educate the patient so they can ask the right questions and know the basics of the skin problem before they step into the doctor's office. He's currently working at a dermatology and laser center of Semi Valley. In addition, he's the founder of a company called FixWarts, which is a really cool product that is very unique, and you'll be able to find that eventually. It's not live yet, but at fixwarts.com. Now, online dermatology clinics specialize in treating of different things, but this one will focus on warts and that sort of thing. So whether you're on your way to the dermatologist, pediatrician, or your general practitioner for a skin problem, or you just want to learn more about what dermatology is about, whatever problem you might be having. Steve clearly is a very well-spoken guy. He speaks in plain English, so I think that his podcast is going to offer quite a bit of value. So I also know that his website will too. I'm a little biased because I'm helping him work on it, but I think it was very generous of him to let me use that conversation for this podcast, and I hope you got some value out of it. And if you do, you know how to follow along. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, dig deep, my friends.